How did people endure brutal Arctic winters in homes built from wood and soil, when temperatures plunged dozens of degrees below zero? We often picture Viking settlements buried in snow, battered endlessly by freezing winds. Yet history shows something remarkable. These communities didn't merely survive, they flourished. Their success wasn't the result of luck or legend, but of highly refined engineering. Every part of their home, from the ground beneath it to the roof overhead, worked together as a single system designed to trap warmth. These were not simple shelters, but carefully crafted thermal strongholds, perfectly adapted to the unforgiving northern world. Watch until the end to discover how the Vikings turned deadly cold into an advantage, and why their homes could outperform many modern buildings. One overlooked secret will surprise you. The Viking home, the famous longhouse, was far more than a structure. It functioned like a living organism. Scandinavian peoples, who spent much of their lives on the sea, applied shipbuilding logic to architecture on land. The result was a distinctive form unlike anything else. Some longhouses stretched over 30 meters, and the largest reached nearly 80. Their walls curved outward, echoing the hull of a long ship. This design wasn't decorative, it served a vital purpose, deflecting relentless northern winds so air flowed smoothly around the building instead of slamming into it. Life for the entire community unfolded beneath one enormous roof. There were no private rooms as we understand them today. The household head, relatives, laborers, and even enslaved people all lived together in one vast interior. This shared living wasn't just cultural, it was practical. Dozens of bodies inside a confined space produced constant warmth, making human presence itself a crucial part of the heating system. The longhouse, sometimes called the longhouse, was conceived as a unified entity, a self-contained ark built to endure many months of winter. Its placement was carefully planned according to cardinal directions to reduce heat loss. Entrances were rarely cut into the short-end walls, which faced the strongest winds. Instead, doors were hidden along the longer sides, often shielded by additional extensions. The walls of this earth ship were massive and layered. Wood alone was too precious, and not insulating enough to be relied on by itself. Instead, Vikings created a composite wall system where each layer played a specific role, turning the house into something remarkably similar to a modern thermos. This knowledge wasn't accidental. It evolved over centuries of experimentation, allowing scarce heat to remain trapped indoors. At the core of the structure stood a heavy wooden framework. Thick, vertical posts carried the immense weight of the roof. These supports, typically cut from pine or oak, were driven deep into the ground. But the spaces between them weren't filled with thin planks. Instead, Vikings used far more effective natural materials, resources that surrounded them and performed far better in extreme cold. Before raising the frame, builders prepared the foundation with care. Large, flat stones were laid in a continuous ring around the house's perimeter. This stone base served two critical purposes. It leveled the ground and, more importantly, kept moisture from the soil away from the wooden posts, preventing rot and extending the life of the building. Between the posts, Vikings placed their most important insulating material, turf. This wasn't loose soil, but dense slabs of earth held together by living grass roots. Cut into large rectangular blocks like oversized bricks, turf was stacked into walls of astonishing thickness. At the base, these walls could measure up to 2 meters wide, gradually narrowing toward the top for added stability. Blocks were often interlocked or laid in angled patterns to eliminate gaps. The insulating power of turf was extraordinary. Its porous structure trapped countless pockets of still air, the most effective natural insulator known. The principle is identical to modern foam or mineral wool. Even more remarkable, turf was alive. In spring, grass sprouted across the outer walls, binding everything together with fresh roots. From a distance, the house looked less like a building and more like a natural mound rising from the land. What do you think? Could natural materials like these rival modern insulation? But this was only the beginning. In the next section, we'll uncover a heating method so unexpected that it often shocks modern audiences: living heat itself. What if fire wasn't the only thing keeping a Viking household warm? The next layer of their heating system may sound shocking today, but for the Scandinavians it was completely normal. They shared their living space with animals, not out of necessity or neglect, but because it was one of the most effective survival strategies ever devised. The longhouse was never intended to shelter people alone. During winter, it also served as a barn. These two functions were inseparable. Inside, the structure was divided into zones: a living area and a working area. Often, half, or even more, of the building was dedicated to housing livestock. Cows, sheep, goats, and horses represented a family's greatest wealth, and in winter they lived under the same roof as their owners. This arrangement wasn't accidental. Building separate barns in such a harsh climate would have been inefficient and dangerous. A standalone structure could freeze solid, killing the animals inside. By keeping livestock indoors, Vikings ensured their survival and gained a powerful source of heat at the same time. The human living space and the animal stalls, known as the fosse, were usually separated by a simple wooden partition. This barrier was not sealed. It marked a boundary, but it allowed warmth and air to circulate freely. People and animals effectively shared the same atmosphere, breathing the same air beneath the long roof. The physics behind this system were simple and brilliant. Large animals constantly generate heat. A single cow produces as much warmth as a small heater. A dozen cows, enclosed in a protected space, created a steady heating source that worked day and night without consuming fuel. Animal heat was treated as a resource, just as valuable as firewood or turf. The layout of the house enhanced this effect. The living area floor was often built slightly higher than the barn floor. This wasn't only for cleanliness, preventing waste from spreading. It also took advantage of convection. Warm air rises. Heat from the animals naturally drifted upward into the higher living space, blending with the warmth from the central hearth. The animals benefited just as much from this shared arrangement. Being inside the same structure as people and receiving residual heat from the fire protected them from lethal cold. It was a true symbiosis. Humans kept animals alive, and animals helped keep humans warm. Of course, there were disadvantages. The most obvious was the smell. But for Viking households, livestock odors were simply part of daily life. Survival mattered far more than comfort, as we define it today. Smoke from the hearth also helped reduce odors, while constant airflow prevented stagnation. If you find this solution clever in its simplicity, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories about medieval survival technologies. But warmth wasn't only about heat sources. The greatest enemy of comfort in the north wasn't cold, it was wind. Wind steals heat through the smallest openings, creating deadly drafts. That's why every aspect of longhouse design focused on controlling airflow. One of the most striking features of Viking homes is the near absence of windows. Glass was extremely rare and reserved almost exclusively for churches. Ordinary homes sacrificed daylight to protect warmth. Occasionally, tiny wall slits were used, but in winter they were tightly packed with moss, straw, or wooden plugs. Life inside unfolded in constant twilight, broken only by firelight. This was a deliberate choice. Vikings understood that every window weakened their thermal defenses. Darkness was preferable to freezing. Instead of wall openings, light and ventilation were sometimes provided through roof openings, a solution we'll examine shortly. Entrances demanded even greater attention. Doors were the most vulnerable point of any structure, so Vikings engineered them carefully. Longhouse doors were always low. Anyone entering had to bend down, a gesture of respect, perhaps, but more importantly, a way to reduce the rush of cold air when the door opened. The doors themselves were thick and heavy, built from solid planks and fitted with extreme precision. They didn't hang on metal hinges. Instead, they rotated on wooden pivots set into the threshold and upper beam, ensuring a tight seal with minimal gaps. Often, the entrance wasn't direct. A small vestibule or porch was built in front of the main doorway. This unheated buffer space acted as a thermal trap. A person entered, closed the outer door, brushed off snow, and only then opened the inner door. The cold never rushed straight into the living area. Door placement mattered too. Entrances were rarely aligned directly across from each other, preventing wind tunnels. They were usually positioned along long walls, shielded from prevailing winter winds, sometimes protected by earthen embankments or protruding walls. Can you imagine living for months in near darkness, guided mostly by firelight? In the next part, we'll explore the true heart of the longhouse, the element that provided heat, light, and life itself. At the center of every longhouse burned the element that sustained everything around it. The hearth was more than a fireplace. It was the heart, the engine, and the soul of the Viking home. Without it, the longhouse could not function. Unlike the compact stoves or fireplaces we know today, the Viking hearth was long and open. It stretched down the middle of the living area like a glowing spine, sometimes reaching 10 or even 15 meters in length. This shape was intentional. A long fire distributed warmth evenly across the massive interior, ensuring no one was left shivering at the edges. The fire pit was shallow and lined with heavy stones. These stones were essential. They contained the flames, prevented accidents, and absorbed enormous amounts of heat. Long after the fire settled, the stones continued to radiate warmth, acting as a primitive but highly effective heat reservoir. Fuel depended on geography. In forested regions, wood was burned. In places like Iceland, where trees were scarce, turf and peat became the primary fuel. Peat burned slowly and steadily, producing consistent heat over long periods. Collecting it was a vital seasonal task, a matter of survival, not convenience. The hearth served multiple roles. First and foremost, it provided warmth. Its central placement allowed heat to rise and spread throughout the house. People gathered along raised benches near the walls, all within reach of its warmth. The fire also served as the only reliable source of light. In homes without windows, flickering flames illuminated faces, wooden pillars, and drifting smoke above. The hearth was also the kitchen. Large iron cauldrons hung above the fire on chains or tripods. Here, meals for the entire household were prepared. Soups, porridges, and roasted meat. Smoke, food aromas, and the scent of animals blended together, creating the unmistakable atmosphere of a Viking home. But this open fire posed a serious challenge. How could smoke escape without carrying all the precious heat with it? The Vikings' solution was both simple and surprisingly effective. They did not build chimneys. Instead, smoke rose freely and collected beneath the roof, forming a dense layer above head height. The air below remained breathable, while the upper space filled with hot smoke. This had an unexpected advantage. The heat and soot slowly impregnated the roof beams and rafters, preserving the wood. Much like smoked food, the structure itself was protected from insects, moisture, and decay. Eventually, the smoke needed an exit. For this purpose, openings were placed at the highest point of the roof, directly above the hearth. These roof vents, known as ljori, served as both ventilation and daylight sources, often the only daylight the house received. The ljori was not a simple hole. It was adjustable. Wooden frames and movable covers allowed occupants to control how much smoke and air escaped. A long pole near the hearth was used to open or close the vent. Managing this balance required experience. In winter, the opening was kept barely ajar, enough to release thick smoke, but small enough to trap warm air inside. Clean air was sacrificed for survival. The roof itself played a critical role in heat retention. Like the walls, it was a layered, living system. A strong timber framework supported everything above. Thin wooden slats formed the base, but these alone offered little protection. Above them lay a waterproof layer made from birch bark. Stripped carefully in large sheets, the bark was laid in overlapping layers, directing rain away from the interior. Natural resins made birch bark nearly impermeable to water. On top of this barrier came the true insulation, thick layers of turf. 2 or even 3 courses of turf blocks were stacked across the roof. This earthen mass weighed several tons, demanding an incredibly sturdy frame beneath it. In return, it provided exceptional insulation, preventing heat from escaping upward. The turf served multiple purposes. It insulated the house, shielded the birch bark from sunlight and damage, and eventually became alive. Grass took root, binding the roof into a single durable shell. The house didn't sit on the land, it merged with it. Snow, too, became an ally. In winter, heavy snowfall piled against the walls and roof. The longhouse gradually vanished beneath a white blanket. Instead of clearing it away, Vikings allowed snow to accumulate. Packed snow trapped air, forming an additional insulating layer. A meter of snow could stabilize temperatures around the house, even when blizzards raged outside at -30 degrees. Under this snow cocoon, heat loss slowed dramatically. Wind was sealed out. Temperature swings softened. The longhouse became a climate-controlled shelter powered by fire, earth, animals, and physics. Inside this dark, smoky refuge, daily life continued. Along the long walls stood raised wooden platforms. These benches served as seats by day and beds by night. Sleeping above floor level kept people away from cold air, which sank toward the ground. Skins and wool blankets provided additional insulation, and many slept fully clothed. The floor remained earthen, with the central hearth cutting through the space. Movement happened in the middle. Life happened along the sides. The layout echoed a ship's interior, practical, efficient, and communal. Yet the longhouse wasn't the only structure in a Viking settlement. Certain tasks required separate spaces. Blacksmithing, for example, posed a serious fire risk. Forges were built away from homes, often as semi-underground structures. Dug partially into the earth, these buildings benefited from natural insulation and protection from wind. The ground itself helped regulate temperature. Other workshops followed the same principle. Weaving sheds, carpentry spaces, even early steam baths. These compact buildings maintained stable microclimates while keeping the main dwelling safe. Together, these structures formed a carefully balanced system. The longhouse provided warmth and shelter for daily life, while specialized buildings allowed work to continue throughout winter. In the end, the Viking longhouse was not just a home. It was a masterpiece of environmental design. Thick turf walls, living roofs, animal heat, controlled smoke, and snow insulation all worked together as one. This was survival through understanding, not domination, of nature. What other forgotten technologies would you like to explore? Ships, weapons, or ancient beliefs? Share your ideas in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss future journeys into the engineering of the past.